For 1.3, we have solving equations with variables on both sides. When we have variables on both sides, what I like to do with these is bring the variable that is the negative over to the one that's positive, or to make sure that when I move my variables, I end up with a positive coefficient to that variable. For example, with A, we have 10 minus 4x is equal to negative 9x. Now, since this one has the variable that has the negative 9x by itself already, I just move the negative 4 over by adding it to both sides. However, if there was a constant on both sides, I would want to move my 9x over so that way my x would have a positive coefficient. But since, again, that negative 9x is by itself already, I just add the 4x to both sides. So I have 10 that gets dropped down. The 4x's cancel out. 10 is equal to negative 5x. From here, I just divide each side by that negative 5 to get my x by itself. And I get that x is equal to negative 2. For B, we have 3 times 3x minus 4 is equal to 1/4 times 32x plus 56. So I'm going to start by distributing the 3 into the 3x minus 4, as well as distributing the 1/4 into the 32x plus 56. So when I multiply the 3 times 3x, I'm going to get 9x. The 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. The 1/4 times anything is like saying that number that is being multiplied by divided by 4. So 1/4 times 32x is the same thing as 32x divided by 4, which is just 8x. And then we have 1/4 times 56, so it's the same thing as saying 56 divided by 4, which gives us 14. From here, I have a 9x on one side of my equal sign and an 8x on the other side. I want to bring my 8x over to the 9x so that way I end with a positive coefficient. So when I do this, I'm going to subtract each side by that 8x. My 8x's would cancel. My 14 drops down, so does my negative 12. And then my 9x and my 8x subtract from each other. So I'm going to be left with x minus 12 is equal to 14. From here, the only thing I have to do is move that 12 over by adding it to both sides. So those 12s would cancel, the x drops down, and x is going to equal 26. Again, if you were curious as to if this is the correct answer, the only thing you'd have to do is plug it back into your original equation and simplify. If you get a true statement, then your answer is correct. For C, we have negative 2x is equal to 3x plus 10. So I'm going to move that 3x over to the negative 2x since it's by itself. I'm going to subtract it from each side. When I do this, my 3x's are going to cancel. My 10 drops down. So I'm going to get negative 5x is equal to 10. I then can divide each side by the negative 5. Those 5s would cancel, and I'd be left with x is equal to negative 2. For D, we have 1/2 times 6h minus 4 is equal to negative 5h plus 1. So again, I'm going to distribute that 1/2. So I have 1/2 times 6h, or 6h divided by 2 gives me 3h. And 1/2 times -4, or -4 divided by 2 is -2. And I'm just going to drop down my -5h plus 1. Now I look here, I have a variable on both sides. I have a 3h and a -5h. If I bring that -5 to the opposite side of that equal sign, it's going to turn into a positive and make my coefficient of that variable positive as well. So if I do this, I'm going to add the 5h to both sides. Those 5h's would cancel out. The 1 drops down, so does the -2. 3h plus 5h is 8h, minus 2 is equal to 1. From here, I'm going to add my 2 to both sides. They're going to cancel on the left side, and that 8h is going to drop down. So this is leaving me with 8h is equal to 3. From here, I just divide each side by that coefficient of the variable. So I'm dividing each side by 8. The 8's would cancel out, and h is equal to 3/8. And again, you can leave this as an improper fraction. You do not have to turn it into a decimal, and it cannot turn into a mixed number, so you would leave it just like this. For E, we have -3/4 times 8n plus 12 is equal to 3 times n minus 1. So we're going to distribute the -3/4 as well as the 3. So when I do this, I'm going to actually write it out to where I'm doing 3/4 times 8n minus 3/4 times 12 is equal to 3 times n plus 3 times -3. When I did this, it's so that way I can see my multiplication a little bit easier, so that way when I look at this, I can cancel things out with my fraction before I multiply to make my life a little bit easier. So the first one I have is -3/4 times 8n. The 4 and the 8 can simplify. The 4 would become a 1 and the 8 becomes a 2. So that way you're only doing -3 times 2n. And then you can do the same thing with the -3/4 and the 12. So the 4 would turn into a 1 and the 12 would turn into a 3. So -3 times 3 is all you're doing there. We can multiply the 3n and the 3 times -3. That gives us 3n minus 9. That's on the other side of that equal sign. And now we just have to simplify the multiplication on the left side. So -3 times 2n is -6n. And -3 times 3 is -9. So -6n minus 9 is equal to 3n minus 9. Now this is what I've been talking about since we started this lesson. I have a -6n and a positive 3n. If I move that -6n, I'm going to add it to both sides, and then my coefficient would be positive with my variable. So I'm going to do that instead of moving the 3 over. If you did move the 3 over, you're just dividing by a negative, which is perfectly fine when you're dealing with equations. However, when we start working with inequalities, it gets a little bit more difficult. So that's why I like to bring over my term that is attached to that variable that is going to make my coefficient positive. So I'm going to add this 6n to both sides. I'm going to drop down the -9's. And I'm going to cancel out those 6n's. So I'm going to have -9 is equal to 9n minus 9. I add the 9 to both sides. That's on the same side as the 9n. And they cancel out on both sides. So -9 plus 9 is equal to 0. And then 0 is equal to 9n. From here, I just divide each side by that coefficient to get n by itself. And I rewrite it to where n comes first. So 0 divided by 9 is 0, and n is equal to 0. So I distributed the negative 3/4 and the 3. From there, I moved over the 6n, so that way my coefficient was positive. Did you have to do that? No. You could have moved the 3n over. You would have gotten the same exact answer. From there, I move my 9's over. They cancel out on both sides. So because they cancel out on both sides, I have a 0 on one side, and that's what's equal to that 9n. And then we just divided by the 9 in front of the n and got that n was 0. For example, 2a, we have 3 times 5x plus 2 is equal to 15. So I am going to distribute this 3 and do 3 times 5x, which is 15x, and 3 times 2, which is 6, equal to 15x. From here, I am going to subtract my 15x from each side. You'll realize that 15x minus 15x is 0. So these both would cancel out. Your 6 would drop down, and it says 6 is equal to 0. This is not true. So whenever you get something like this where you have a false statement, your answer is no solution. So if you get to an answer that's a false statement, your answer for the whole thing is no solution. For B, we have negative 2 times 4y plus 1 is equal to negative 8y minus 2. So we're going to distribute that negative 2. We're going to have negative 8y minus 2 is equal to negative 8y minus 2. If we moved those 8y's over, we would add them to both sides. And then my 2's would drop down. My 8y's would cancel on each side. So I just have negative 2 is equal to negative 2. Now this is a true statement, so my answer is infinitely many solutions. So if I get a false statement as an answer, my answer is no solution. And if I get a true statement as my answer is infinitely many solutions. For C, we have 4 times 1 minus p is equal to negative 4 plus 4. So this 4 is going to distribute in. I'm going to have 4 minus 4p is equal to negative 4p plus 4. I can add my 4p to both sides. They're going to cancel. And the 4's are going to drop down. So I have 4 is equal to 4. This is a true statement. So I have infinitely many solutions. For D, we have 6m minus m is equal to 5/6 times 6m minus 10. So you can do the same thing that I did with my last or my other equation that I solved with the fraction when I distributed. So if I did that, I'm also going to combine my like terms on that left side. So if I combine my like terms on the left side, I get 6m minus m, which is 5m. And then we have 5/6 times 6m and 5/6 times negative 10. So this 6 is going to cancel out with the 6 and the 6m, and that's just going to be 5 times 1m, which is 5m. And the 5/6 times negative 10, the 6 will become a 3, and the negative 10 becomes a negative 5. So it's negative 25 over 3. I'm going to subtract the 5m from each side. 5m minus 5m is 0. So those cancel out. Give me 0 is equal to negative 25 over 3. Now this is a false statement, so this is no solution. So again, if you get no solution, it's because you have a false statement. If you get infinitely many solutions, it's because you have a true statement. For E, we have 10k plus 7 is equal to negative 3 minus 10k. So I'm going to add my 10k to each side. The ones on the right are going to cancel out. I'm going to drop down that negative 3 as well as the 7. So I have 20k plus 7 is equal to negative 3. I'm going to subtract the 7 from each side. We're left with 20k is equal to negative 10. We then divide each side by the 20. So k is equal to negative 1/2. For F, we have 3 times 2a minus 2 is equal to 2 times 3a minus 3. So I'm going to distribute this 3 as well as distribute this 2. So 3 times 2a is 6a. 3 times negative 2 is negative 6. The 2 times 3a is 6a. And the 2 times negative 3 is negative 6. You'll realize that with this equation, just like with all of your other ones that you got true statements with, your two sides of this equal sign are identical to each other. So because it is identical to each other, you really wouldn't have to work any further because you can see that 6a minus 6 is the same exact thing as 6a minus 6. So you can just give me infinitely many solutions. for your next part, which is going to be the last thing we go over today, it tells us that a boat travels upstream on the Mississippi River for 3.5 hours. The return trip only takes 2.5 hours because the boat travels 2 miles per hour faster downstream due to the current. How far does the boat travel upstream? So you want to start with the fact that this boat travels 3.5 hours upstream. So we don't know the distance yet. So that's 3.5 hours, or 3.5 times x. It's going to be the same distance that it takes to do the 2.5 hours times the 2 miles per hour faster. So that's x minus, or x plus 2. So that's 2.5 times x plus 2. From here, we just distribute the 2.5, and we get 3.5x is equal to 2.5x plus 5. I'm going to solve for x. I'm just going to subtract the 2.5x from each side. These are going to cancel. My 5 drops down. I get 1x is equal to 5. So x is equal to 5. It asks us for the distance. X is not the distance. The distance is that 3.5 times x, or the 2.5 times x plus 2. So you can do this one of two ways. You could either find your distance by doing 3.5 times 5, or do it to where you plug the 5 into the 2.5 times 5 plus 2. So it's totally up to you. I find just multiplying is easier. So if I do 3.5 times 5, 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 3 is 15 plus 2 is 17. I have one decimal place in my question, so I'm going to have 1 in my answer. So that's 17.5 miles. So my distance is what I was asked for. So how far does the boat travel upstream? That's my distance. I have to plug that my x in. Once I get that into the either 3.5 times x or the 2.5 times x plus 2.